Deathless Titans placed upon the face of the earth 3 generations of men. The first of them being men of gold. Becoming too close to gods themselves, Cronus ended their time on earth with an eternal sleep. A second generation came to be, the men of silver. Unwilling to serve the Titans and make sacrifices upon the holy altars as all men shall do, they were condemned to dwell under the earth for all eternity. Finally, a third generation, the men of bronze, a brazen race, sprung from the ash tree. Terrible and strong are they. Join me as I tell you the tales of the men of bronze. This is Dragon's Blood, Odyssey to Dionysodoros, Episode 2. Gamden collected his swag and left the library, full of worry and doubt. Lost in his own world, he walked aimlessly through the streets of the city, toward the inn, and thought to himself, Draman thinks I don't know how dangerous this job is. Sea voyages are just the beginning. I hate ships. I bet the city guard at Camwaset hasn't forgotten about how I made them look like fools when I made off with the king's prized bottle of wine. What made things worse was when I broke into the captain of the guard's room later that night and left the empty bottle on his pillow. Now that I look back, I probably shouldn't have done it. If they spot me when I go looking for Senisret, I'll be rotting in the stockade till I'm old and feeble. When I get to Azurda, the Eastern Mildmen won't be a problem. They will be easily amazed and frightened by my magic. The Cyclops Monarch will be hard to get past. Cyclops are smart and very mean, known to pull intruders limb from limb. When Gamden finally reached the inn, he went into the pub and sat down at a table. The barkeep walked over and said, "Why so glum?" as he dried his hands on his soiled apron. "Last night you were having such a good time." "I took on a new job today, and it's going to be a tough one," answered Gamden. "Might have bitten off more than I can chew." "Sounds dangerous. Maybe you should pay your tab from last night and sleep with a clear conscience." "Maybe you're right," said Gamden. Reaching into his breast pocket, he pulled out a diamond and pressed it into the sweaty palm of the barkeep. The barkeep whistled in amazement. "This is far more than what you owe me." "Like you said, leave with a clear conscience, and maybe that will get me a couple bottles of wine for tonight too." The next morning, Gamden woke and started his day early. His bedroll and haversack over his shoulder, he went to the market and bought what he needed for the trip to Camwaset to find his old traveling mate. He could trust him with his life, and the last time they were together, there was no bad blood. Gamden made his way through the narrow streets of the city, down to the farmlands that sprawled before him and led to the cliffs. The weather was cool, and a light snow was falling, covering the hardy winter crops. The roads were now wet and coated his boots in slick mud that was going to make the descent to the docks treacherous. Falling more times than he could remember, Gamden made it to the harbor, where he looked for a seaworthy ship with a captain he could trust. As evening came with cloudy skies, the sun disappeared, and the snow that was falling up at city level had turned to rain at the sea. He talked to many captains, and nearly all of them were too drunk to stand. One skipper was loading his cockboat with supplies to take to the ship, anchored off in the distance. He was coming back one more time for the last of his cargo, then was departing for Camwaset. After waiting a while, Gamden made his way back to where the cockboat should have been, but only empty water greeted him. "Damn it!" he shouted, and kicked at a gull that flew away squawking. A voice shouted back to him out of the mist that concealed the end of the dock. "Hey, you still need passage to Camwaset?" "Yeah, I'll pay you whatever you want," Gamden shouted back. "Get your ass down here. The last of me cargo was loaded, and we're ready to weigh anchor as soon as we get back to the ship." Gamden ran to the end of the dock where the boat and the 4 men plus the skipper waited impatiently. As Gamden approached, a single lantern at the bow dimly lit the area. All of them wore long coats to keep out the cold, damp sea air. The skipper's long black hair was oily and fell over his shoulders. A scar ran across his face, starting above his right eye and running down to his left upper lip. 10 gold pieces will get you across the Chephren Sea. My ship is small and has no creature comforts, and you will have to sleep in the cargo hold. You don't like me terms? Then you can swim, snarled the skipper. Gamden's stomach was already turning from the thought of the sea voyage. 10 gold pieces sounds good to me. As he reached into his pocket for the gold, the skipper said, I run a dry ship, lad. No booze. If I catch you with a drink in your hand, I'll have you thrown off the ship. Gamden looked at the size of the 4 men near the captain, swallowed audibly, and said in a meek voice, Sounds good to me. Then handed over the gold coins. All right, lads, commanded the skipper. Get in the cockboat, and let's make for the ship. The skipper sat at the bow, and the 4 crewmen manned the oars, while Gamden searched in vain for a comfortable place to sit. It only took a couple of minutes to get to the ship. Lanterns at the bow and the stern dimly lit the rickety old vessel in the mist. Oh shit, Gamden said out loud by mistake. The skipper heard him and said in a gruff manner, What's the matter, lad? You don't like the looks of me ship? She may be old, but she sails the seas like no one's business. Ain't that right, lads? Aye, skipper, all 4 crewmen said in unison. No slaver, no warship can keep up with her, continued the skipper. Haven't kept all me fingers this long by being the slowest ship. How'd you get that scar on your face? Asked Gamden. The skipper reached up without thinking and touched the scar. He looked off into the mist for a moment, lost in his memories. Skipper, are you all right? Asked Gamden. He shook his head, loosening the cobwebs that memories spin. Huh? What'd you say, lad? Oh yes, me scar. Been a long time since anyone asked me about me scar. The cockboat came alongside the ship. Ropes were lowered and the oars stowed. The lowered ropes were secured into the rowlocks, and the pulleys on the ship squealed to life under the weight. The skipper continued by saying, Got this scar from me first, captain. Disobeyed a direct order. Got the business end of a whip across me face. Cut me good. The skipper reached into his coat and presented a whip. This whip here, as a matter of fact. Did your captain give you that whip? Asked Gamden. No, lad. I killed him and took the whip, then took his ship. This ship here, as a matter of fact. The skipper made a sweeping gesture with his arm. How'd you like that, lad? The skipper slapped Gamden hard on the shoulder, laughed and walked away, saying, Ask one of me men to show you where to sleep. Hope you brought your own food. I ain't feeding ya. The skipper left Gamden standing amongst the crewmen who were busy storing cargo and getting the ship ready to sail. One of the crewmen walked up behind him and said, Don't worry about it, kid. Startled, Gamden spun around and found himself face to face with an old man. His long coat was torn and patched in many places. His head was shaved, revealing several liver spots, and his long gray beard was braided and hung down to his belt. Skipper is an asshole. Everyone knows that. So does he. Now you do too. Gamden let out a nervous laugh. The old man continued, I'll make sure that you're comfortable below decks, and get you some hot soup after we're underway. Gamden held out his hand and said, Thanks for that. My name is Gamden. The old man took his hand and replied, You're welcome, kid. My name is Achaemenes. Always a treat to find a new friend, and someone different to talk to than these bounders. Gamden finally started to feel at ease in this unfamiliar place. They made their way below decks through the maze of cargo, livestock, and crewmen. Somewhere near midships, Achaemenes stopped and said, Here are some nice dry sacks of grain to sleep on for the trip. Achaemenes hung his lantern on a thick wooden beam and said, "I'll leave this here for you. Just remember to snuff it out before you fall asleep." "How will you make it to the deck? It's pitch black outside this room," asked Gamden. "Don't worry about it, kid. I know every part of this ship by heart. I'll be back in a little bit with that soup I promised you." Achaemenes left the room, and Gamden said to himself, "Might as well get out of these cold, wet clothes." As he struggled to get his boots off, he heard the skipper shout the order for full sail. Pulleys began to squeal. Ropes and beams groaned under the weight of the main sail going up the mast. The wind caught hold of the sail, and the ship lurched forward, almost throwing Gamden off the sacks of grain. The sea was always rough in the winter, and this year was no different. Gamden could feel when the ship left the breakwater and headed out to the open sea. For the first couple of minutes, the water in the harbor was calm, but past the breakwater, the waves of the Chephren Sea began to smash into the bow of the ship. Just as old Achaemenes promised, he returned with a full bowl of soup. He caught sight of Gamden's pale face and said, "You look terrible, kid. Eat this soup and you'll feel better. My own special recipe. I add the thysamus root. Settles the stomach. Doing it for years." Gamden thanked him and took the bowl, then added, "I've never liked to travel by sea. My stomach always does somersaults. Plus, I'm terrified of ships." "The thought of drowning is horrible," Gamden rambled on nervously. Achaemenes laughed out loud and said, "Don't worry, kid. This old ship will never sink." He touched the beam above his head with affection. "Now eat the soup, and you'll feel better. Skipper says we have a strong wind, and we'll be in Nebetah in a couple of days." The voyage was boring for Gamden. The weather was cold and wet, so he stayed below deck and studied the map that he had copied from Draman's library and caught up on his sleep. Gamden knew that they had arrived at the port city of Nebetah when the ship came to a jarring halt, and the anchor was lowered into the seafloor. He got dressed quickly. His clothes were still a little damp, but far better than before. He scraped the flint and the lantern together and lit the wick, and made his way to the deck. Just as he was reaching for the cargo door, it flew open, revealing old Achaemenes' smiling face. A gust of cold sea air met his nostrils, and he inhaled deeply, smiling back. "Nothing smells better than after a couple of nights in the cargo hold, hey kid?" "You got that right," answered Gamden. "Smells like home." Once on deck, he saw that darkness and stars were still in the morning sky. In the distance, a lighthouse flickered, revealing other ships in the harbor. "You got family here, kid?" asked Achaemenes as they walked across the deck to where the cockboat was being prepared to go to shore. "No, I'm going to find an old friend in Camliset. Should be holed up in one of the pubs there." Gamden placed a hand on the headrail and continued, "He loves his drink, so that should be the best place to start." From the stern of the ship, the skipper could be heard shouting orders about what he wanted loaded into the cockboat for the first trip to shore. Making his way to the bow, he kept on shouting at the crew to get things done faster. And when he came up to Gamden, he said, "And I suppose you'll want to go to shore with me right away too, won't ya?" Yes, stammered Gamden. "Yes, I would love to go to shore, skipper." The skipper spun around and shouted, "Take those sacks of grain out. Lad wants to go ashore with me first." "Ah, come on, skipper. Just got him in," groaned one of the crewmen. "Shut up and do as you're told," shouted the skipper as he stormed off. Gamden turned back to Achaemenes and said, "I have something special for you." Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a handful of dates and gave them to his new friend. Immediately, his face lit up with a smile, and he thanked Gamden. "Oh, I love dates. This is really a treat. I can never afford them. Thank you so much." From the cockboat, the skipper shouted, "Get your ass over here, lad, or I'll leave you here to rot." Gamden ran to the boat and jumped in. He waved one last time to Achaemenes. Look for episode 3 of Dragon's Blood, Odyssey to Dionysodoros, on YouTube.